It's amazing, isn't it? Even after all this time, even with all the official reports and investigations, the JFK assassination still has this power to captivate us.
It really does. It's one of those events that just stays with you.
And I think a big part of that enduring fascination, let's be honest, is the lingering question. Have we really been told the whole story?
Right. There's always that sense that maybe, just maybe, there's more to uncover, more pieces of the puzzle that haven't quite fit.
And that's what we're diving into today. We've got this whole new batch of declassified documents related to the assassination investigation.
Real primary source material, stuff that was actually being created and circulated at the time.
So we're not here to speculate or push any particular theories.
No, we're letting the documents speak for themselves.
Our goal today is to just see what these documents suggest might have been, well, hidden, to really dig into the intriguing details that have only recently come to light. What do you think? You ready to get into it?
Absolutely. Let's jump in.
All right. One of the things that jumps out right away from these documents is the heavy focus on Cuba, both before and after the assassination. Like, we have a report from December 12th, 1963, just a few weeks after the event. And it goes into some really specific movements of people and cargo between the islands. It's almost like they were watching everything.
Yeah, this document, 104-176-10371.pdf, is fascinating. It talks about a report from November 6th, 1963, so about 2 weeks before President Kennedy's death. And it describes 2 trucks pulling up in Botabano, Cuba. 24 men get out, and the source describes them as looking like Soviets. And not just any Soviets, they were well-groomed, clean clothes, suitcases, the whole 9 yards. And then, get this, at midnight, they all hop on a ferry to Isla de Pinos.
It's like something out of a spy movie.
Right. What gets me is the level of detail. It's not just some guys got off a truck. They're painting a picture here.
It does make you wonder. And then, same report, a week earlier, October 28th, 2 olive green military trucks show up. Driven by militiamen, each truck is pulling a trailer, enclosed metal body. Those also get shipped off to Isla de Pinos.
What strikes me is the timing. All of this is happening so close to the assassination. Makes you think, were they watching these movements because of something specific, or was this just routine surveillance?
Exactly. It raises so many questions, like, was there something about these particular movements that seemed important at the time, but then maybe got overlooked or downplayed later on?
You have to remember the political climate back then. The U.S. and Cuba, after the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, things were tense.
Oh, incredibly tense.
So any kind of Soviet presence, any Cuban military activity, that would have set off alarm bells.
For sure. It makes you wonder if there was a real concern about some kind of Cuban connection to the assassination and how deeply they investigated that. Was it as thorough as other lines of inquiry? Did they share everything they found?
Exactly. And this focus on Cuban activity, it wasn't just about people and cargo. We've got another document from the same day, December 12th, 104-176-10372.pdf. And this one details a lot of truck traffic. But this isn't just any truck traffic. This is heading towards Torrens Barracks.
Torrens Barracks, that's a former reformatory, right?
Yeah, southwest of Havana. And here's the thing. A field comment on the document labels it as an active surface-to-air missile assembly area, active in October and early November of '63.
So right before the assassination.
Right. And this report, it's attributed to a former Cuban government employee. They're saying that these trucks, a lot of them trailer trucks, covered with canvas, they were seen heading to Torrens almost every night after 10 p.m.
Okay, so what were they carrying in there?
That's the interesting part. On a couple of nights in October, witnesses saw these large trailer trucks going into the base, and they were carrying these long tube-like objects. They were sticking out at least a meter beyond the truck beds, covered by tarps, but you could still see them.
Tube-like objects going into a missile assembly area. That definitely raises some eyebrows.
Yeah. And again, the timing is crucial. Was all this military activity in Cuba just normal procedure? Or was it potentially more significant given what was about to happen?
You have to wonder if investigators considered that angle. Was this information about this heightened activity taken seriously when they were trying to piece together what happened on November 22nd?
It definitely suggests the U.S. intelligence was paying very close attention to what was happening in Cuba. Which brings us to the question. If they had all this detailed information, do they fully investigate its potential connection to the assassination?
Or did they, for whatever reason, choose to focus on other aspects of the investigation and maybe downplay this whole Cuba angle? It's a big question.
It is. And then things get even more interesting when we look at what happened right after the assassination. The focus on Cuba doesn't go away. In fact, you could argue it intensifies. We've got this document, 104-176-10375.pdf, also from December 12, 1963, and it reports a sudden increase in militia surveillance along the northern coast of Matanzas province in Cuba.
Matanzas province, that's where Rio Palma is, right?
Exactly. And this document specifically mentions Rio Palma. It also talks about a bunch of arrests in nearby towns, all happening just days after Kennedy's death.
Wow. So they really clamped down. It does make you wonder what triggered such a quick and strong reaction.
Right. Were Cuban authorities worried about some kind of fallout from the assassination? Were they actively searching for individuals who might have been involved?
Or maybe they thought someone connected to the assassination might try to escape through that area. It's curious. And was any of this heightened security, these arrests, was it ever publicly connected to the JFK investigation?
Good question. It definitely suggests something was going on. This specific region, this fast response, it seems like something worth taking a closer look at.
Agreed. Now, shifting gears a bit, these documents also show a real interest in certain individuals in Cuba right after the assassination. Document 104-100736-10442.pdf, dated December 13th, 1963, is a request for information, and it lists a bunch of people in Cuba.
This is a fascinating list. It includes professionals, doctors, a judge, but then it also has a perfume manufacturer, a former police officer, and get this, a general staff officer in the Cuban Army. It's quite a mix.
A very diverse group, and the request comes so soon after Kennedy's death. That really stands out. It makes you think, why these specific people?
Were they suspected of having some connection to Lee Harvey Oswald? Or maybe they were of interest for other reasons, potentially related to that Cuban angle we talked about? Were investigators secretly looking into a possible Cuban government link to the assassination?
The inclusion of the Army officer definitely raises some eyebrows.
Yeah, it makes you think, were they exploring the possibility of involvement at that level? In the same document, it also mentions AMCONCERT 1 reports on Fidel and Raul Castro.
So the top leadership was also under scrutiny. It just emphasizes how intensely they were looking at Cuba in those days after the assassination.
It shows they were considering many different possibilities, even if those possibilities weren't always publicly acknowledged.
Right, and it's not just about gathering information. There's also evidence of active U.S.-backed efforts inside Cuba. Document 104-17076-10375.pdf, the one we talked about earlier with the militia activity, it also mentions a report from AMI 14. This report talks about a DRE, that's Directorio Revolucionario Estudiantil, an infiltration team operating in Cuba. They were gathering intel from local fishermen and even relatives of certain individuals.
The DRE, they were a major anti-Castro group with pretty well-known ties to U.S. intelligence.
So they were basically running covert ops inside Cuba.
Exactly, and they were getting information directly from everyday Cubans.
Yeah.
It just shows how much was going on behind the scenes.
Makes you wonder, could these U.S.-backed operations, even unintentionally, have played some kind of role in what happened on November 22nd? And did the public ever know the full extent of these operations and any possible connection to the assassination?
It's a huge question. And speaking of covert activities, we've got document 104-137-10153.pdf from November 27, 1963, just 5 days after the assassination. It's a multi-addressed cable about potential recruitment efforts in Cuba. The way it's labeled IPLS pouch cable to following, French pouch, shows that this information was going out far and wide.
So this wasn't some small-time operation.
No, they were clearly prioritizing these recruitment efforts in Cuba and immediately after the assassination. It makes you wonder what kind of recruitment they were doing. Were they looking for people with specific skills or knowledge that could help them understand what happened to Kennedy?
It certainly adds to the intrigue. Now let's switch gears again. This time we're looking at a different set of documents, a bit more mysterious. These concern a man named Alexander P. Schlatten. Document 104-178-178-1717.pdf from December 1963 is a director cable about Schlatten traveling to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And there's a very interesting phrase in it, concerned briefing and training of B-Tide.
They also mentioned that he was traveling light and was expected to contact the station upon arrival. But yeah, that phrase, concerned briefing and training of B-Tide, jumps right out at you.
It does, especially in the context of intelligence operations. Code words like B-Tide usually means something classified is going on.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what exactly were they concerned about? What was so sensitive about this briefing and training?
And here's the thing. The very next document, 10417 about 17020.pdf, is a sanitized version of that same cable. A lot of it is redacted, probably stuff about who sent it and who received it. But that comment about the concerned briefing and training of O2 Tide is left untouched. The O2 is almost certainly the sanitized version of B.
So even with all those redactions, they left that part in. That's telling.
It is. Why redact a seemingly routine travel cable unless there's something sensitive they're trying to hide?
And then you have that code name still there, even in the sanitized version.
Hmm.
It all points to something being kept secret, something potentially connected to the assassination. What was Schlatten really doing in Brazil? Was it related to the investigation in any way?
These are the questions, aren't they?
They really are. And speaking of mysteries, there's another document, a handwritten list. It's labeled Assets Known. The date on it is January 1st, 1900.
1900, that can't be right.
No, it's almost definitely a mistake. Probably meant to be from the 1960s. But the list itself is pretty interesting. It has a bunch of names, each one paired with a code name, like Liempty, Lacala, all sorts of names like that. And next to some of them are short descriptions like Lamptey 4, bus in lane bounds.
Cryptic. So this seems to be a list of people involved in, shall we say, sensitive activities. What can we glean from it?
The existence of this list tells us that there was an active network of individuals working, potentially covertly. And the little descriptions, though brief, give us a hint of what their roles might have been.
But where were these assets operating? In Cuba? Elsewhere? And what kind of information were they gathering or providing? And was this network ever publicly acknowledged or investigated in connection with the assassination?
It definitely points to a whole layer of intelligence work that, for the most part, remained hidden from public view.
And finally, we have a document that's dated November 22nd, 1963, the very day of the assassination. It's a review of a program codenamed ZAPRINA, and the bottom line is it was a failure, a big one.
Yeah. What's striking is the timing. On the day President Kennedy is assassinated, they're writing up this report about how this major U.S. recruitment program targeting Cuban technicians completely fell apart. They wanted to get 2,000 technicians from Western Europe alone, but only got fewer than 50 approved contracts. They blame it on lack of cooperation from the Cuban side, and even suggest Fidel Castro himself wasn't interested anymore.
So a major U.S. effort to, in some way, engage with Cuban personnel collapses on the very same day as this world-changing event.
It really makes you think. What was the real purpose of ZAPRINA? Was it just about technical expertise, or were there other objectives, maybe related to intelligence? And when it failed, did the U.S. government maybe switch to more covert, less official methods to get what they wanted from Cuba?
Like the kind of activities we've been discussing, it's definitely food for thought.
It is. And it also shows how complex these intelligence operations can be, especially when you're dealing with a relationship as fraught as the U.S. and Cuba had back then.
So as we look back at all these documents, it's clear there's a lot more to the story of the JFK assassination than maybe meets the eye.
Definitely. We've seen the intense focus on Cuba, the targeted interest in specific individuals, evidence of those covert operations and recruitment efforts, that mysterious redacted cable, and that list of coded assets.
And let's not forget about the collapse of that big U.S. program in Cuba, all happening on the same day as the assassination. It's a lot to process.
It is. And it all circles back to that question we started with. What has the government been keeping from us?
Right. What haven't we been told? These documents, they give us these glimpses into all this activity, all this interest, but it's still shrouded in secrecy, and some of it might have been deliberately left out of the official story.
Absolutely. And the fact that they're still declassifying these documents after all this time, it's a reminder that our understanding of the past is always evolving.
It really makes you wonder what else is still hidden away in those archives. What other secrets are waiting to be revealed? Secrets that could change how we understand this pivotal moment in history.
It's a thought-provoking question. I guess we'll have to wait and see what the future holds.
I guess so. But one thing's for sure, the quest for the full truth about the JFK assassination is far from over.
Far from over.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been, as always, a fascinating conversation.
It has. Always a pleasure to delve into these topics with you.
Until next time, keep those questions coming.
And keep searching for those answers.
We'll be right here with you, digging deeper into the mysteries of the past.